Welcome to prehistoric Australia, a land full of huge, fearsome animals. During this period, giant kangaroos, giant marsupial lions, very long snakes, and terrifying birds lived. If you think modern Australia is a scary place, wait a minute and see what it was like 100,000 years ago. Almost every living creature at that time wanted to kill you, but humans still managed to survive alongside these creatures. In this video, we examine how humans survived during that time, and were we responsible for the extinction of these animals? We go back to the middle of the late Pleistocene, between 126,000 and 12,000 years ago. As soon as we step onto Australian soil, we come face to face with huge and terrifying animals. Let's take a look at some of the scariest of them. One of them is Diprotodon, the largest marsupial that has ever walked the earth. They were 3 meters long and 1.8 meters high, and weighed almost as much as a car. They could have used their large head, huge mouth, powerful jaws, and large incisors that were about the size of bananas to eat their food. But were we among their food? Perhaps the good news was that this species was not a threat to us, because this animal was a herbivore and ate an incredible amount of fibrous plants, such as branches, leaves, bushes, and stems, amounting to about 100 kilograms per day. This gluttony also had a huge positive impact on the environment. This animal ate food and then defecated, thus spreading the seeds of plants over large areas. Since this creature ate so much food, it had to have a very large head. But if it hadn't had a strange evolutionary feature, it might not even have been able to lift its head off the ground. This creature's skull was filled with air pockets, which made it lighter and easier to lift. They lived all over Australia except for Tasmania. Some scientists believe that these creatures probably migrated. If this theory is correct, they were the only marsupials to do so. It's time to get to know another creature from prehistoric Australia. This time, a much scarier creature, the giant goanna lizard. This huge lizard, called Megalania, was the largest land lizard in history, or a ferocious carnivorous reptile that ate large mammals, snakes, birds, and other reptiles. So maybe we should stay away from it. This lizard could have been up to 5 meters long and weighed up to 600 kilograms. If you look closely at its snout, you'll see a strange bulge. In this snout were terrifying teeth that curved back. This species was both an ambush predator and a scavenger, waiting for an unsuspecting victim like a kangaroo, deer, or wild boar to come along. Or maybe even you. Then it would strike with a swift movement. Its poisonous saliva would first cause infection and then kill the victim very quickly. This creature is still around, of sorts. You can see Alania's relatives in reptiles like the Komodo dragon. But its closest relative is another creature in Australia, a creature called the Parenti. But this one isn't quite as gigantic. But if you thought the giant lizard was scary, wait until you see what I'm going to talk about next. It's time to meet another monster. This time a giant snake named Wanambi, which was fortunately not poisonous. Wanambi loved to live in the dry and cool regions of Australia. Of course, just because we said this snake was not poisonous does not mean that you should approach it, because just like the Megalias, it was an ambush hunter, and its hunting method was to suffocate its prey. If you were roaming around Australia at that time, you might encounter it near a waterhole. Usually kangaroos and wallabies that stopped to drink water were its favorite prey, and it would wrap its 4 to 6 meter body around the prey and put enough pressure on it to suffocate its prey. Of course, these snakes no longer exist.
These giants lived in Australia 2.5 million years ago. But if we go a little further, between 40 and 60,000 years ago, a terrible event happened when the prominent ones became extinct. Shortly before the extinction, a new apex predator arrived on the land. It wasn't a new, terrifying beast, but us humans. If you lived at that time, you were one of the first inhabitants of Australia. Early humans probably arrived by boat from northern Australia about 65,000 years ago and quickly spread out along the coast and inland. Two important questions arise here. First, how did humans survive in a world full of these dangerous predators? Well, early humans had two important competitive advantages for survival: fire and hunting tools and weapons. Scientists have found the remains of large, hunchbacked men while examining ancient Australian Aboriginal settlements. One of the weapons used to defend themselves against these monsters was probably sharpened bones. But the story doesn't end there. It seems that these early humans also used nets to trap some creatures because these animals moved very quickly and it was not easy to hit them with a spear. But if they could throw a net over them, it would be a much faster and more effective way to trap them. After this, the hunter's job became easier. In order to take care of yourself more during that time, you had to build a shelter. In Australia, stone and bone shelters were very popular because they could prevent animals from entering and save you from being eaten. These shelters were also essential for protection against harsh environmental conditions. Australia at that time had different temperatures and varied climates. Most people lived along the coast, where it had a savanna-like climate and scattered rain. But if you went inland, you would encounter harsh deserts and a lack of water resources. This made life there difficult. But this lack of water also had an advantage for early humans. It made travel and movement throughout Australia easier. Natural land bridges appeared, helping humans to reach new areas and escape these fearsome giants. But what other creatures did humans have to deal with? If you were swimming in a lake, you might encounter a ferocious freshwater crocodile. This huge monster was up to 5 meters long and was known as the king of the swamp. Its prey was usually animals that came to drink from mud springs, or even unsuspecting people who were swimming. The freshwater crocodile was a fearsome predator. It had deeper and wider jaws than today's saltwater crocodiles. Its closest living relative is the saltwater crocodile, which grew to 6 meters. But the king of the swamp had a larger body and snout than today's crocodiles. Well, let's get away from this crocodile and look for another creature. Guess what? If we fly into one of the old forests, we'll encounter a strange predator, Thylacoleo Australian marsupial lion. Of course, this lion was not like the ones you see in the zoo. It had a pouch, was a carnivore, something between a kangaroo and a deadly cat with a pouch to carry its young. One of the most ruthless predators that ever existed. Scientists have estimated that its jaws had a crushing force of about 250 kilograms, and it sometimes ate carrion. But most of the time it lurked and tore its prey to pieces with its terrible teeth. Its large incisors and sharp cheek teeth were perfect for tearing prey to pieces. In addition, just like modern tigers, it had a sharp claw on its finger. But unlike other tigers, this claw was so large that it was probably used to rip open its prey. With these powerful teeth and jaws, it could defeat any creature. If you were to encounter it in the Australian wild, the good news for you could be that it was not a fast runner.
So if you saw this monster, you should just run, and the faster the better, and you should not try to climb a tree at all because this creature was quite capable of climbing trees. Of course, there is a lot of debate about this predator's diet. Its ancestors were herbivores, so some speculate that this marsupial lion may have used plants in addition to meat from time to time. It also seems that crocodile eggs and bone marrow were also on its menu. Another theory, known as the frugivore hypothesis, says that this animal may have also eaten native Australian cucumbers. Of course, its teeth weren't suited to chewing plants, so it probably rarely ate a leaf or fruit. Let's move on to another scary prehistoric Australian creature, a bird called thunder. This bird was over 2 meters tall and had giant legs. But the problem was that it had very small wings, so it couldn't fly. This bird was very heavy, weighing about 220 to 240 kilograms, and naturally, it laid heavy eggs, each weighing more than 1.5 kilograms. The thunderbird compensated for its inability to fly by running very fast. Fortunately, since it was probably an herbivore, it was not dangerous to you. This bird still exists in some way in the world today. Its descendants are ducks and geese. The question that arises here is, what caused the giants of Australia to become extinct? Was it humans who caused it, or was there another reason? Different scientists have different theories about this. According to one theory, called the Blitzkrieg theory, early Australians massacred all the animals of the late Pleistocene so that they all disappeared within 1,000 years. Proponents of this theory argue that it took humans several thousand years to establish themselves on the continent and expand their territory. That is why we see a synchrony between the two events. So it seems that humans at this time gradually killed and ate these giants, gradually destroying some species over 1,000 years. But this theory may seem a little illogical. Let's go back to the thunderbirds, which carry clues with them. Scientists studied the fossilized eggs of these birds and noticed a pattern of burns. But what caused these burns? Humans or nature? They concluded that the burns were not caused by natural fires. So there is evidence that humans played a role in the fate of these birds. And given the destructive behavior of modern humans, it is easy to believe that humans at that time were also responsible for the extinction of these species. But there's also evidence that refutes this theory. First of all, some scientists believe that many of the giants, perhaps up to 80%, were extinct before humans arrived. But more importantly, large fossils have been found that date back to a time after humans arrived on the scene. This proves that humans and these giant animals lived side by side for a long time, with this coexistence lasting from 10 to 30,000 years ago. This shows that while early humans may have hunted these giant creatures, but they did so in a sustainable manner.
If this hypothesis is correct, and humans hunted sustainably, then there must be another factor that was fatal to the giants. The reason that we are very familiar with today and hear about a lot is climate change. The melting of the ice during the last ice age had a huge negative impact on animal habitats. The critical period for Australian animals was about 30,000 years ago. Some scientists who study climate change have noticed that when the ice age ended, the climate became warmer and drier. In a place in Australia called Candy Springs, there are several remarkable fossils. Comparing fossils from 500,000 years ago with fossils from about 40,000 years ago, scientists have found that older creatures ate plants that were representative of a wetter climate, but 40,000-year-old creatures were forced to use plants that grew in drier environments. As a result, later hominids stopped eating the salty plants that older hominids enjoyed. These creatures instinctively understood that when water was scarce, they had to limit their salt intake, which is consistent with what we know about climate change. The events of the end of the Pleistocene, when the ice sheets of the Ice Age began to melt and temperatures rose, had a negative impact on plants and shrubs, and therefore on the life of hominids. The drying of the environment, the increase in fires, the disappearance of prairies, and changes in vegetation may have caused many of these creatures to disappear. Scientists who support the Blitzkrieg theory also have a response to the climate change perspective. They argue that the climate has been changing over the past 2.5 million years, with periods of cold and dry and warm and wet. Yet the megafauna have weathered these cycles time and time again. It was only when humans came along that the megafauna were unable to cope with climate change. This is certainly not a completely settled question. It is possible that humans caused the extinction of the megafauna, Or perhaps the main cause was environmental, or perhaps a combination of both. What we do know for sure is that humans are powerful predators with a unique ability to influence the environment. Today, we are witnessing a relentless rise in temperatures due to human-induced global warming. Humans are both amazing creators and unique destroyers. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked the video, be sure to like it, and if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, follow us to spend your free time with us and have fun.